Friends, today as we come to explore the third Beatitude, the first observation I'd like to make is that the phrase, "Blessed are the meek, they will inherit the earth," is almost a direct quotation from Psalm 37 verse 11. The only thing that's missing is the phrase, "Blessed are." In Psalm 37 verse 11 it reads as follows, "The meek will inherit the land or the earth and enjoy peace and prosperity." The essence of Psalm 37 is a warning and a caution, not to fret when you see unjust, wicked or untrustworthy people prospering. And the opening verses of Psalm 37 sets the tone for the whole psalm. Verse 1, "Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong." Verse 3 goes on, "Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture." And then verse 10 and 11 in a way form something of a punchline for the entire psalm. "A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. The meek will inherit the land or the earth and enjoy peace and prosperity." And so in the context of Psalm 37, the meaning of meekness is really about trusting God, trusting the great wisdom that holds us. It's about not fretting or not giving in to anger when you see the unjust and the unrighteous or the devious prospering. To be meek, according to Psalm 37, is to trust that there is a higher wisdom at work. It's to trust that in God's time and in God's way, God's justice and ultimate goodness will somehow prevail, that God's universe is ultimately not chaotic or not ultimately unjust, but rather that the God who is love and goodness is also truth and light, and that perfect justice ultimately rules the world, even though we may not always be able to see it or perceive it clearly. How much energy do we burn up and expend bemoaning the sins and faults and the wickedness of others, especially those in positions of authority and power? The meek, according to Psalm 37, have left all these cares and concerns into the hands of the divine, the great cosmic wisdom, and having done so, they can direct their energies into more constructive places, lighting candles instead of cursing the darkness. Blessed are the meek. They will inherit the earth. Perhaps Psalm 37 might suggest, blessed are those who trust in the higher divine wisdom and justice. They will be enabled to live on earth with greater inner freedom. A second observation I'd like to make is that the English word meek is in fact no longer the most helpful translation. I read one commentary that suggested that the meaning of the English word meek has changed over the centuries since it was first used by the early English reformers when translating the Bible into English. Whereas the original meaning of meek would have been about being humble, patient, gentle, it has today come more and more to mean to be submissive, to be easily imposed upon, and therefore to be weak. But the original Greek word praus in our text would have been far closer to the idea of being gentle and humble. Quite a number of modern translations, therefore, use the word gentle. Blessed are the gentle, they will inherit the earth. What's interesting is that most other places in the New Testament where the Greek word praus is used, it is translated as gentle, and on some occasions as humble. In fact, I found it quite astonishing how often the word gentle comes up as you read through the New Testament. The value of gentleness is dotted all over the New Testament. And just a few examples: Philippians 4 verse 5, "Let your gentleness be known to all." Titus 3 verse 2 urges Christians to speak evil of no one, but to be gentle and courteous toward all people. 2 Timothy 2 tells us that an elder in the church must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to everyone, correcting one's opponents with gentleness. Galatians 6 verse 1, Paul writes of restoring others who have sinned with a spirit of gentleness. It seems that in the New Testament, gentleness is consistently described as being a key attribute of Christian conduct and behavior. In Matthew 11, Jesus describes himself as gentle. Come to me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. As Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, quoting from Zechariah, Matthew 21 describes Jesus as gentle. See your king coming gentle and riding on a donkey. He is gentle as he welcomes children and blesses them. He is gentle as he responds to the woman caught in adultery. He's gentle towards the woman who anoints his feet. And he reaches out and touches with gentleness the man with leprosy. But as we read in the Gospels, as we read them in their fullness, we see that the gentleness of Jesus is anything but weak. There is a strength in Jesus that enables him to stand his ground and even confront religious authorities whose religiosity have made them hard-hearted and uncaring. There is a strength in Jesus as he walks resolutely to Jerusalem, even though he knows he is walking to his death. The gentleness of Jesus is born of an inner strength, not from weakness. I found a quote online from Leo Roston. He writes, "I learned that it is the weak who are cruel, and that gentleness is to be expected only from the strong." And Andy Moore, who describes himself as a coach for gentle rebels, writes, "There is nothing strong about the person who is quick to lose temper and resort to aggression and violence in their spirit, words, and action. This is anything but strength. It is in fact a display of profound weakness." But in contrast, those who are gentle are strong and full of self-control. For without that inner strength of self-control, there would not be any gentleness at all. And so another Christian writer, Gail Irwin, writes that gentleness is not apathy, but it is an aggressive expression of how we view people. We see people as so valuable that we deal with them in gentleness. Blessed are the gentle, says Jesus. They will inherit the earth. Thirdly, I'd like to briefly wrestle with the question of the meek inheriting the earth. It's never quite made sense to me. In probably over 3,000 years or more since Psalm 37 stated that the meek will inherit the land or the earth, it would seem that our world is still structured in a way that benefits the aggressive, the greedy, the pushers, and the exploiters. What could it mean then that the gentle will inherit the earth? As I was chewing on this question during the week, it struck me that in fact there is a profound truth within it that we all need to hear at this time. If our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are going to inherit the earth from us, then we are all going to need to learn to walk more gently upon it. Unless we all learn to live more gently on the earth, there's not going to be much left to inherit. In Psalm 37, the wicked are described as those who borrow from others and do not repay. Our current way of life is living off resources borrowed from future generations. Our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Has the time perhaps come for us to begin to repay what we have borrowed? And if we had to all use our imaginations, what might life begin to look like if we all began to live more gently upon the earth? What would need to change in our way of life? It was wonderful to hear this week Prince William questioning those billionaires who are jetting off on private trips into space And he said the time has come to stop trying to find other places to live in outer space, but rather to use our resources to fix this world instead. Also encouraging to hear that Coldplay, the band, made a commitment before they go on a new world tour that they would do everything in their power to make their trip carbon neutral. Everyone needs to learn to live with greater gentleness, even our millionaires and billionaires. And what might it mean to live more gently on the earth? It doesn't necessarily mean gluing ourselves to motorways. It could be as simple as considering how we spend our money, what we spend it on, how much we're willing to waste. In what way are you and I being asked at this time to become gentle revolutionaries? Blessed are the gentle, says Jesus. They will inherit the earth. I'd like to close with a brief story that my father shared with me that I think encapsulates something of both the strength and the power of gentleness. At one of the theological colleges in England where my father taught, the principal of the college, a minister, reflected on the meaning of the phrase, the wrath of the Lamb. You might recognize the phrase from our preaching series on Revelation. It's found in Revelation 6 verse 16. And in reflecting on this phrase, the wrath of the Lamb, the minister told of how he had got home from work one day, tired, withdrawn, grumpy, and irritable. And in this state of unpleasant irritability, he had been abrupt and even rude to his little 4-year-old daughter, who had come over to spend time with him as he arrived home. And after having dealt with her rather abruptly and rudely, he got up and went off to his study to be by himself. A few minutes later, he heard a little knock on the door. It was his daughter. As she opened the door and stood at a distance in the doorway, she simply said, "I love you, Daddy." And he said in that moment, through the innocence and gentleness of his 4-year-old daughter, he had come to understand what the book of Revelation means when it speaks of the wrath of the Lamb. "I love you, Daddy," she had said. And in that moment, he was pierced to the heart. There is power in gentleness. In Proverbs 15 verse 1 we read, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Blessed are the gentle, says Jesus. They shall inherit the earth.